Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. Let's begin as we usually do with the economy. As we anticipated in yesterday's video, today, Tuesday, Beijing made a series of announcements about new measures hoped to stabilize China's slow and painful economic slowdown, as it is battered by a prolonged property sector debt crisis, continued deflationary pressure, and high unemployment. Today, the central bank chief, Pan Gongsheng, told a news conference in Beijing that it would cut a slew of rates in a bid to boost growth, expressing that China will, quote, reduce the reserve requirement ratio and the policy interest rate, and drive the market benchmark interest rate downward. The reserve requirement ratio will be cut by 0.5 percentage points in the near future. End quote. He explained that the move will inject around $1 trillion, $141 billion in long-term liquidity into the financial market. He added that Beijing would, quote, lower the interest rates of existing mortgage loans and unify the down payment ratios for mortgage loans. End quote. It will also, quote, guide commercial banks to lower the interest rates of existing mortgage loans to the vicinity of the interest rates of newly issued loans. End quote. These final moves have been debated for some time. As we've discussed in previous videos, this will ease some pressure for households, but will put further pressure on already historically low bank profit margins. Many China analysts were expecting the People's Bank of China to announce more measures after a run of downbeat data, saying the US Federal Reserve's large rate cut will provide China more room to ease policy. Consumer confidence sank in July while inflation remains near zero. Business surveys in August recorded sinking profits, and Chinese manufacturers' inventories are swelling. Car sales have been dropping and retail sales growth has slowed sharply. Home prices in August posted their steepest decline in 9 years, and yields on 10-year Chinese government bonds have plummeted to new lows, indicating investors are souring on the economy's prospects. More economists are calling for China to stimulate growth, including those based inside the country. Yesterday, we covered former deputy head of the Development Research Center at the State Council, Liu Shijin's call for at least 10 trillion yuan, $1.42 trillion in ultra-long government bonds to be sold to save the economy. In a recent note, Nomura's chief China economist Ting Lu, someone who is always worth listening to, expressed, quote, despite the surge in government bond financing, infrastructure investment growth slowed markedly, as local governments are constrained by tight fiscal conditions. We believe China's economy potentially faces a second wave of shocks. Under these new shocks, conventional monetary policies reach their limits, so fiscal policies and reforms should take the front seat. End quote. Thus, the monetary policy announced today will do little to reverse the slowdown, according to this analysis. And moving back to those stimulus measures announced today, Asian stocks rose in response to the development, indicating the market, in the short term at least, is happy with the news. Equity benchmarks in Hong Kong jumped more than 2% at the open, while onshore Chinese stocks also gained. This is partly because China also announced that it will allow brokerages and funds to tap the central bank's funding to buy stocks, adding support after the CSI 300 index fell to more than a 5-year low earlier this month. But is this market reaction sustainable? Jun Rongyip, a market strategist at IG Asia, expressed today, quote, market participants may like what they see today. The effects could drive a short-term rebound in Chinese equities as the latest move dispels previous concerns around the authorities' inaction. End quote. Wong Kok Hong, head of institutional equities at Maybank Securities, told clients today, quote, it is not the bazooka that those looking at Hong Kong, China were waiting for, and the reaction from some clients is quite limited. Market participants would like to see more, perhaps other moves to boost consumption, and the general consensus seemed to be those would not be forthcoming until after the US elections. Hong Kong stocks rose, but we will have to see if those gains can hold. End quote. This is a point worth repeating, which we've covered in previous episodes. It could well be that Beijing is waiting to see who will be in the White House after the US election before they decide which stimulus measures and fiscal policies to turn to. Now, the final analysis we'll look at before we move on to the next development is from Shen Meng, director at Chansun & Co., who observed today, quote, "Measures to support stock market can't directly change companies' earnings trajectory and can't directly guide investors' decisions. So while they may be good for the stock market in the mid to long term, they lack substantial basis in the near term. Cutting the RRR will unleash more cash to lend out, but its impact on lowering financing costs is rather small, and therefore its impact on stimulating loan demand from companies and residents is limited too." End quote. Next up for the economy, youth unemployment continues to be a source of deep social and political concern. According to new official data from the National Bureau of Statistics, the surveyed urban unemployment rate for Chinese people aged between 16 and 24, youth unemployment, this excludes students, climbed to the highest in August since the data series was first released in January. The rate came in at 18.8%, surpassing July's 17.1%, to set a record for the second consecutive month. Chinese financial media outlet Caixin reports that the summer of 2024 saw a large proportion of an estimated 11.8 million new graduates entering, quote, "what is arguably China's weakest job market in years, as companies in various sectors downsize to cut costs amid a slowdown in economic growth and weak market confidence." End quote. The outlet explains that companies in the once booming real estate, internet and tutoring sectors used to be major employers for young people, but many have been shrinking their payroll due to regulatory tightening and the economic slowdown. Hong Kong-based South China Morning Post writes this week that as China's job market contracts, new graduates are finding it increasingly difficult to secure meaningful employment, forcing them to lower their career aspirations and salary expectations. This challenge was highlighted recently when a 24-year-old physics master's student in Suzhou was hired as a high school janitor. The decision drew widespread attention online as youth unemployment in China remains at a record high. Businesses continue to struggle, further reducing hiring demand and adding to the difficulties for young job seekers. In response to the shrinking job market, many graduates have turned to jobs like delivery driving, which had become socially acceptable and flexible, but even that sector is now oversaturated. Recently, Meituan, a popular food delivery app, had to deny a report that claimed 80,000 of their delivery drivers have master's degrees. Additionally, Chinese universities are promoting postgraduate studies to help students build their credentials and reduce immediate employment pressure. Universities like Lanzhou University and the University of Science and Technology of China are now enrolling more postgraduate students than undergraduates, as many young people opt to delay their entry into the workforce. Dan Wang, chief economist at HSBC, yesterday explained to clients, quote, "It's increasingly hard for young people to find high-paying jobs as before, because in the past 3 years, the high value-added city service sectors, which used to absorb many fresh graduates, were in sharp contraction, in particular real estate, finance, and IT." End quote. Next up, we have one more development to cover, but just quickly, if you're getting some value from today's episode, don't forget to hit the like button, and I have a huge favor to ask if you do enjoy these episodes, that is to subscribe if you have not done so already. About 41% of regular viewers are not subscribed to the channel. It'd be amazing if we could get this below 40. Sharing is a big help as well if you know someone who would be interested in this sort of content. Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are also in the description for those who want to help keep the channel financially sustainable. Thank you so much. Next up, I wanted to examine a commentary published this week by Minxin Pei, a professor of government at Claremont McKenna College and author of The Sentinel State, Surveillance and the Survival of Dictatorship in China. Pei has been quite critical of Beijing in recent years, so we note his leaning here, but he is also a respected authority of Chinese politics. The piece he published this week is called "The Game Isn't Over for China, but It Is Garbage Time," and it touches on several themes which we've been following closely in recent months. We end today by quoting selected excerpts from the piece directly. "It is hard to recall a more striking disconnect between the Chinese people and their modern leaders. When President Xi Jinping marks the 75th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China on the 1st of October, he will hail a thriving nation destined to become a prosperous superpower by its centennial in 2049. Ordinary Chinese, on the other hand, see their country entering quite a different period, captured in a recent coined phrase, the garbage time of history. In sports, garbage time refers to the point in the game in which one team trails so badly that defeat is no longer in doubt. The remainder of the contest is filled with pointless, low-quality play. Many in China are convinced their country is trapped in a similarly futile dead end, its prospects unlikely to brighten as long as its direction remains unchanged. On the surface, such pessimism is driven by economic woes. The collapse of the real estate sector has shrunk the net worth of the middle class. The resulting negative wealth effect has crumbled consumption, exacerbating the slump and threatening deflation. The malaise, however, has deeper political roots. The country has gone through much worse economic times before without disappearing. Tens of thousands of state-owned enterprises were liquidated and more than 30 million workers laid off at the end of the 1990s. Still, ordinary Chinese remained optimistic about the future. The difference is that those citizens believed in the competence of the reformist then-premier Zhu Rongji. They accepted that the government needed to take decisive action to shore up China's technically insolvent banking system, restructure its unprofitable state-owned enterprises, and make the economy more competitive in the wake of the 1997-98 Asian financial crisis. And they could look forward to China joining the World Trade Organization. Such faith in the country's leadership was redeemed again when in 2008 through 2009, financial crisis plunged Western economies into recession. The government pumped bank credit equal to 25% of GDP into the economy within a year and made China one of the few bright spots globally. Now, Chinese are not only dissatisfied with government decisions, more importantly, they see no possibility of improvement because the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party has repeatedly signaled that it intends to maintain the same domestic and foreign policies that have led to economic stagnation at home and geopolitical tensions abroad. In the past, collective leadership and competition for power among rival factions created some space for policy flexibility and reversals. No single leader was powerful enough to force the regime to stick to demonstrably counterproductive policies. Under Xi, the party is ruled by a highly centralized, if not personalized, leadership. Changing or reversing policies is extremely hard, if not impossible, as evidenced by the absence of major shifts since China's recent economic struggles began in mid-2023. Moreover, geopolitical tensions with the West have diminished the country's prospects, and most Chinese people simply do not see when and how relations with their most important trading partners will return to normal. The phrase garbage time of history thus is a thinly veiled dig at Xi's open-ended rule, implying that the sorry state of affairs will not change as long as he stays in power. In sports, garbage time ends only when the clock runs out. Not surprisingly, official media and propagandists have strongly denounced the phrase. Restoring a sense of optimism will require something more than censorship, however. Lowering tensions with China's neighbors in the US is a minimum first step. Implementing real economic reforms, for example, diverting resources from high-end manufacturing to stimulating consumption, would boost sentiment. If Xi relinquished some of his positions in top decision-making bodies, he currently chairs at least 5 central commissions and 3 leading groups, he would signal a willingness to share power. As unlikely as those options may seem, the alternative path will not be pretty. At 75 years old, the PRC has already beaten the longevity record of the Soviet Union by 1 year. In retrospect, the fall of the Soviet regime was no accident. It entered its own garbage time of history in the mid-1970s, when Soviet leaders refused to adopt much-needed economic and political reforms. The CCP surely doesn't want to meet the same fate. To avoid it, Xi and the party will have to rethink their game plan. Here ends the direct quote and today's episode of China Update. Let me know what you thought of today's developments, especially this opinion piece from Pei, which we just covered, in the comments below. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a wonderful Tuesday, and I will see you all tomorrow.